All right, question on YouTube from Paul. What are your thoughts about a compact car in the United States? In my opinion, they won't sell as well as perhaps a redesigned Model 3. I don't see many compact cars on the road. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I'll let you go first, Omar, because you're our distinguished guest.
Well, I think you're right that the compact market is not as hot in the US as it is in Europe and China. I mean, in Europe and China, they're going to eat this compact up because they have smaller streets. A compact is a lot more suited to those markets in many ways. And there's also a need to push the price down in those markets. So I think the next gen platform, the compact, it's going to be a huge hit in Europe and China. I think they'll sell a decent number of them in the US too, but really what it's about for me is the robotaxi. And if you look on Tesla's production and delivery schedule, they actually refer to the Gen 3 platform as robotaxi and others, right? So there's going to be a few different vehicles built on this next gen platform, but it's going to have half the cost of a 3 and Y, which means that for the same amount of investment, you can build 2 robotaxis for the price of 1. And guess what the average number of riders per Uber or Lyft is? It's 1.2. So the vast majority of time, you've got 1 person in there, or maybe 2 people in there. And so a smaller car without controls, they can actually have probably almost as much space as a 3 or Y inside if it's an autonomous car without controls. And that's going to be great. If I just want to call a quick robotaxi ride for 1 person, this is the perfect vehicle for that, even in the US market, I think. So I think there's probably also going to be a van and some other stuff. So I think it'll be an entry-level product, and the entry-level product's always popular. I think they're going to be doing things like steer-by-wire and stuff that are going to make this a lot better for a robotaxi than any other model. It's sort of purpose-built for that. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot sold in the United States and also in Mexico, right? Mexico can't really buy a lot of these cars. South America can't really buy a lot of these cars. And I think they're going to actually have a lot more people in Mexico and South America that can afford one of these compacts or next generation Teslas on the next gen platform. So that's really exciting and just sort of expanding the TAM between the 3 main developed markets we have today of US, Europe, and China.
Yeah, those are great call outs. I think that the compact car market in the United States isn't that big. And I'm going to try to use the best words possible here. I think it's because there are no good cars in that segment from any automaker. You know, I think the Toyota Corolla, as an example, is a extremely reliable car. But
my first car.
I've never heard your first car, right? Phenomenal car.
Yeah, I love it.
That thing will survive a nuclear holocaust. Okay, that thing is insane. However, I've never heard one person say, I love driving my Toyota Corolla, or I love the feature set and the incredible entertainment that my Toyota Corolla offers me. I love the acceleration of my Toyota Corolla. I love the driving dynamics of my Toyota Corolla. I've never heard that before in my life, right? So, and this is where the compact car, I think, is going to completely change the dynamic of what it means to own an affordable car. An electric vehicle naturally has advantages from a driving dynamic perspective that a gas car doesn't, which is a low center of gravity and very quick acceleration at 0 RPM. These 2 things together make for a very good driving experience, a really good driving experience. So once you enable that type of driving experience for the masses, I think it creates this sort of new thing that a lot of people haven't experienced before, which is a kind of a fast car. And having a kind of a fast car that handles really well is kind of exhilarating, man. It feels great. It feels really good to be in power of that such vehicle. And so the only question has been for these automakers, how can I offer this at an affordable price? And it turns out that when you have a gas car architecture, it's really hard to do it affordably because it messes with your weight distribution, and it just messes with a lot of things that you have to account for versus just sticking a freaking suspension on there and an engine and a transmission that takes forever to shift. And, you know, It's the slowest thing in the world, but it gets you from point A to point B. So once that gets introduced, I think that's going to break the paradigm of what it means to have an affordable car. It's going to create a market that hasn't existed before. And so from that standpoint, you put that within the context of where we are today, especially in the United States. It is impossible to find an affordable car in the United States, especially new. Everything is a pickup truck or an SUV. Automakers don't really make these mass market cars en masse anymore because that's not where the profit is. It's in the SUVs and the pickups, but they're unaffordable to most people. Then you think about the dynamic of how people for the last, say, 15 to 20 years, their paychecks really haven't kept up with inflation and all these other things. So there's a craving for affordable car. Think about how many people take public transport because they have to. How many people take a bus because they have to. How many people carpool because they have to. How many people can't even they walk to work because they have to, or they pick a job around them because they can't afford a car. Like this dynamic is very real in the United States. And so once that gets introduced, it's going to change a paradigm. It's really going to change it. And then the autonomy part of it is a completely different equation that puts a completely different thing on top of it. So that's how I think about it. Yeah, that's how I think about it. So
yeah, imagine the performance model of that Tesla compact. That's going to be something.
Yeah, it'd be sick. You know, it's like the hot hatch days with the Honda Civic back in the day. But this thing is going to be incredibly affordable, and it's going to get it's going to cost you a quarter of what it cost you to run the Civic, and it never freaking breaks down. Oh, and it drives itself, by the way. Okay, cool. Why wouldn't somebody buy that, right? That's how I think about it.
I mean, it's going to be the entry model Tesla. Yeah. It's going to be the entry model. There's so many people who I hear saying, I love Tesla, I love the safety, I love autopilot. I want to put my kid in a car like that, but I don't necessarily want to spoil them by buying them a $40,000 car. I think a lot of people, if there was just something entry level, they're going to sell a lot of that they just couldn't access before.
Great point. Let's do a couple more. Let's bring up the next question on YouTube. Jasper, question. Is FSD level 4 and 5 possible with hardware 3, or is hardware 4 the minimum requirement? This is like the big question. I've changed my mind on this with the latest versions, but where's your head at with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is possible. So just, thinking through this logically, I'm experiencing zero takeover drives with my car today. And well, would it be possible for the car to be zero takeover more reliably over time? Yes, I think so. And the software is still very primitive in many ways. There's still a lot of low-hanging fruit they could take to improve how the software reacts. Like Elon just mentioned that, the pedestrian detection is pretty good, but it hasn't even started to take into account the way the pedestrian is looking or their hand gestures, which can be really important in knowing how to control for them accurately. So there's so much you can do with software. I think people tend to really overestimate the role of hardware and really underestimate the role of software. And it's hard for them to sort of imagine how the software gets better because I think people have a hard time picturing the software, understanding what it does. But really, software is the key here and not hardware. So hardware 4 and hardware 3 are both designed to be compatible with each other. And I think both can achieve driverless, at least in, some limited capabilities, good weather, whatever. I think you'll be able to get it to a level of reliability where it can perform driverless rides. You'll probably start seeing them operate driverlessly in boring tunnels relatively soon, and then just expanding to more and more places. And hardware 4 will probably be better and safer, but both hardware 3 and hardware 4 look like they're trending to get to a place where they actually exceed human performance in terms of safety. And honestly, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because people are always replacing their cars. They're replacing the hardware, they're replacing the software. What really matters to people is it continuing to get better and better and better? And those are the results I think people are seeing, right? So you're not necessarily going to keep your hardware 3 car forever. You'll be using hardware 3. Right now, there's not that much of a difference. Hardware 4 can't actually even run FSD yet. So right now, hardware 3 is a little bit better. But the software is just going to continue to get better and better. I think people are going to be surprised by how much better it can get with just a software update, as we've already started to see happen. Especially with more and more users putting data in, it's just going to be improving faster and faster. And of course, the hardware is going to be upgraded too. So we're not stuck with the hardware 3 hardware forever. There's going to be hardware 4, hardware 5, hardware 6, hardware 7. And, you know, the bottom line is just continuing to improve the performance over time. And I think they're on a really good trajectory to do that, and to get a lot of value out of the 4 million hardware 3 cars that are out there.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint is all the issues I have with full self-driving today are not related to hardware. Like, oh, you didn't sense that. It was a decision the car made around what it sensed. And so to me, that tells me it's a software thing. Now, this is in good weather, or, good enough weather that is not like, say whiteout conditions, or a lot of rain coming down, or say there's ice on the road. So I don't want to speak about hardware 3 and hardware 4 in those contexts. But when it comes to let's say a good to decent driving conditions without any severe weather, my experience has been decision making, and decision making to me seems like a software issue. So we'll see. And my mind has changed on that, because before I was like, man, I wonder if hardware 4 is the thing that's going to allow the system to make better decisions. But then version 11 came in, and I'm like, oh no, it's definitely not. It's totally the software.
Right.
And so we'll see. We'll see what they'll do over time.
And a lot of people miss this. You've seen, for example, that picture of a Cruise hitting the bus, right? It had LiDAR.
Yeah.
It knew the bus was there, right? But what happened was a planning issue where it saw the front of the bus move, and it didn't realize it was one of those connected buses that kind of moves differently. So you can see it, but still predict that it's going to move the wrong way. And a lot of people miss that. I think what's clear is that there's a number of different perception stacks that you can use. There's a number of different sensor suites which are workable. And there's not just one sensor suite that you can use. There's a lot of different ones that can be workable. But we aren't able to drive because of our eyes, right? Someone who wears glasses or someone who wears contacts versus someone who has better vision, they can all drive, versus a bird that has much better vision doesn't have the intelligence to drive. So what it's really about is the brain, right? It's not about the eyes, it's about the brain. It's our brains that allow us to drive more than our eyes. And people with various eyesight abilities can all drive. So same thing in the software. The software is the key.
Great point. I love that analogy.